Hello again, gang. KR King here, helping you homebrew your own D&D campaign. So, as you saw by the title of today's video, I am about to give you the 4 most important words you as a GM will use in Dungeons & Dragons. So, cue the drum roll, and the phrase is, what are you doing? Now, I know a lot of you are, but in fact, this phrase is something that you as a GM can use in countless ways to resolve various, situations that arise between you and your players when you're running D&D. Because here's the thing, Dungeons & Dragons is a role-playing game in which the players have a character who is moving through a world. And a big part of that conceit is for you as the GM and the players themselves to know what that player character is doing at all times. So the thing about this phrase is you as the GM are not merely asking the players, what are you doing? But you're asking the players to be aware of what their character is doing at all times. So let's think about this in terms of situations in D&D. When the players are traveling, you say, what are you doing? How are you getting through the world? Are you walking? Are you riding? Are you sailing? Where do you plan to stop? And when you do stop, what do you do? Say there's a little inn by the side of the road. Do you just walk into the inn and say, hey, I need a room? Do you look around at this rest stop? Are there guys loitering near some well? I mean, what are the activities? Who are you talking to? How do you present yourself? Do you just use your real name? Are you going under a disguise? All of these things, when you ask the players, what are you doing before activities, it gets them to think about what they're doing. So the players traveling come to a city. What are they doing? Do they go up to the gate, enter through that gate? Do they try to sneak into the city, go over the wall? When they go into the city, what do they do? Do they go to a tavern? Do they go to an inn again? If they have someone to meet, do they introduce themselves as they are? Are they disguised? And all this relates to why they went to the city, and this relates to what they are doing at all times. And the thing is, once you start doing this, you're always asking the players, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? At the macro, and also at the micro level, the players begin to think about what they're doing at all times, and this will help them immerse themselves in the world that you've created. Now, these are some of the macro level questions that you have, the players, when there's downtime, what are you doing? And whether or not you want to go into those activities, because then you get to the more micro level, which is role playing, combat, or just any activities, investigations in some situation, or moving around in some dungeon. Anytime you've got a turn-based set of actions that the players are engaged in, having them constantly thinking about what they are doing really helps to clarify issues and to make it all seem real, make it so that things logically flow. And the players will begin to think about what they are doing as an active part of the game. If the players are investigating, let's say they've come to a village and they want to spy on the village. What are you doing? How do you start that process? You just find a high spot to look down on the village. Do you wait for nightfall and try to sneak in past whatever guards they have, if it's a walled village or some little hamlet? Always saying, what are you doing? And this will, not only the players knowing this, but you as the GM have a sense of where the players are in space. And this is another thing. Where are you? Where are you? Where are you? What is the formation of the group? How are you moving through the world? I've played in campaigns where they never ask, how the party is organized, the composition, who's in front, who's behind. This is important to know when you get into combat situations. And here again, when you have an encounter, NPCs, monsters, whatever, that could turn into a combat situation, before you ask the players to roll for initiative, ask them what they are doing and let them tell you. So let's say they encounter a group of humanoids, let's say 10 men on horseback ride up. Don't ask them, do you draw your weapons? Just say, what are you doing? And let them tell them what they're doing. And you ask each player in turn, what are you doing? What are you doing? And the thing is, don't editorialize. Don't say, are you sure that's what you want to do? No. Just let them tell you what to do. Because once they get used to thinking about what they're doing in these situations, they're probably going to be cautious unless they're the sort of player that likes to instigate trouble. And the thing is that asking the players to think about what they are doing does more than just orchestrate movement, or, in terms of encounters at macro level, micro level. It has other powers as well. And I'm going to talk about one because this is kind of really important, especially in terms of 5e, where asking what are you doing really helps to adjudicate ability checks, skill checks, this sort of thing, especially when you have players with characteristics that are much higher than we have in real life. Because here's the thing, if you have a point-buy system or even a point array, and then you're going to have players with at least 115 and a point array, possibly 3 if they do the 15, 15, 15, and then all the other dumps, then when they do their race, depending on whether the original system or new optional system, they're going to have maybe 117 characteristic. Then when they get to 4th level, if they take a attribute bump, they could have, in theory, an 18 or another 17, this sort of thing. And these are characteristics that are way higher than any of us. I'm a pretty bright guy, but I've met people really much smarter than me. They have to be an 18, don't they? So what's it like to be that smart? I don't know, but I'm being asked to play in a game where my character has this, and then I'm making skill or proficiency, ability checks with this. How do you adjudicate this? And especially when it comes to what I call the mental attributes, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma, you start to get into a fuzzy thing. If you've got an 18 strength, I'm still going to ask the character, I want to lift that boulder. I'm going to say, well, what are you doing? Tell me what you're doing. But it is still a contested, a grapple check. If they're going to use athletics or acrobatics, something like that, I have that's much more of a pure check. Or let's say you're going through a blinding snowstorm. Are you going to get exhausted? You'd make a con check. But even then, when you're going through the snowstorm, what are you doing? Are you, wearing heavy clothing? Are you stopping at a certain point, finding shelter, build a fire, get yourself invigorated? These are the sort of things that you want to ask the players. Just because they have an 18 con doesn't mean that anyone going through a snowstorm like this, or severe cold, isn't going to get exhausted. And exhaustion is something that can really suck. Now, a quick point of order in including charisma on the mental attribute category. Some people will say, well, wait a minute, attractiveness, that's a physical thing. If you're physically attractive, doesn't that influence charisma? I would say yes, it does at the extremes especially, but also it's better for first impressions. Because once you become accustomed to someone, once you interact with them for a while, the physical attributes, I think, go away as opposed to how they present themselves, how they speak or whatever, the mental aspects of charisma. Because personality really does influence people's reactions. And think about the classic heel in cinema is usually very handsome until his unprincipled motives and actions are revealed, and then he becomes very unappealing. And the same goes for the classic femme fatale, who is usually presented as a very beautiful, but often highly sexualized woman who is revealed to be scheming, and evil. And there's all sorts of theories on this from the human psychology of why people with so-called perfect features, when we realize that their personality, their morals are very lax, they really inspire revulsion. But of course, this doesn't really matter in D&D for a couple of reasons. Of course, why are there 6 characteristics? Well, in the original game, 1974, that's what Gygax Arneson came up with. But the other is even more compelling in that in D&D you have fantastic monsters and races in which attractiveness is very much in the eye of the beholder. Of course, we see this in human societies, very far removed human societies all have different criteria for physical attraction. There's that old joke in D&D, how can you tell the difference between male and female dwarves? Well, the females have shorter beards, ha ha ha. But this relates to that truism that we see in human society. So as I said, you can use the what are you doing for the physical attribute checks, but they really come into play when you're using them for the mental attributes. And one more point of order, you might have a game in which you just want to play straight up, can I lift that boulder? Make a strength check. Can I survive the snowstorm? Make a con check. Can I lie to this person? Make your deception check. Are they lying? Make your insight check. You may just want to do the history check, just roll, whatever the roll is, you as the GM, make that decision. But the problem here is I think you are really denying you and your players some of the flavor and some of the interesting aspects of playing a role-playing game. Because the idea of a role-playing game is that you're creating this framework, this storyline, but the players are interacting with the world that you've created, and they're helping you to create this storyline. And what is it based on? It's based on what they are doing. It's not just based on, okay, I make a history check. Oh, I know what this book is. Okay, I make an insight. Again, what are they doing? Because the key here is when you ask a player what they are doing, you're going to filter that action, the player's action, with the attribute of the player character that is perhaps way beyond what that actual player has, and you're mixing those two to create a satisfying outcome of the skill check. And another point of order, many people know this, but I'll just repeat, you tell the player when they're going to make a skill check. You decide that. Do that right away. They can't just go, I make an insight check. I make a deception. No. They can ask you, hey, can I make that or whatever? And then what's your answer? What are you doing, right? And then if it is something that you think is, they tell you what they're doing, and then you make the roll. And of course, do not overuse this mechanic. There are many situations that there shouldn't be a roll, whether too easy or too hard. But you don't want to overdo that either. So let's just say that you have the equivalent of the nuclear football, right, that's carried around by U.S. presidents that has all the codes. And let's say that equivalent item, the actual code to open this case, is only known by one person in the entire world. And when the players come across it, that person is long gone, or they're not there or whatever. And so they say, I want to make a history check to see if I get this code. And the player has an 18 or higher intelligence. They roll a equivalent 23, or they roll a nat 20. Do they get the code? Of course not. There's no way to determine that. Maybe you say in a nat 20. I would say no, they don't determine that. So should I have said, well, then you can't make a check? No, they're looking at this item and they're trying to make a history check. So what do? You examine it closely. Do you pick it up, right? Do you touch it? Of course, that's always a leading question. We look at the lock very closely, the way it's constructed, whatever. So then they roll their nat 20. It isn't the code that they're going to get out of this. It's, you can tell by the leather and this construction that this case came from this place X, maybe in this time. And this elaborate lock, this is the work. You see notice a little sign there on there, the signature. This is this famous artificer Y. This is an item that would only be made by a very important person for some very specific thing, and it would be considered information is very dangerous. Because that way, if they attempt to, I'm going to pick the lock anyway, and the disintegration gas comes out, the players can't go, well, what the hell is that? They used their attribute, and they used their skill check to realize this is something that would only be protected with something very deadly. And here again, let's say you have an insight check they want to make to see if an NPC is lying to them. You can just do the contested deception versus insight. The player rolls. Again, I would rather think about what is it they're doing. They're watching this person very closely. They're looking at their mannerisms. Suppose they say they're going to watch the other people around this person. If this NPC is very experienced at lying, maybe the other humanoids or creatures or whatever around it reveal something, and that gives you a better sense, a better idea that they're lying than just doing the roll. And here again, if the players are looking very intently at this person while they're lying, perhaps they're talking to another person and this person is making their insight check. Maybe they notice something, a ring on here I've seen that from somewhere before, some evil cult, such that even though the contested check, the NPC succeeds, because they have an 18 wisdom, because they have this incredible insight, something strikes them as odd. It doesn't have to be that the person's lying, but there's something else going on here. And this leads to storylines. And this gives them that 18 wisdom that they don't have in real life based on the actions that they took as a player. And the same thing with the charisma checks in terms of intimidation, persuasion, whatever. If you have a bard that wants to make up a song, you don't have to force them to make up a song. You don't have to force them. I've had situations, I played a bard in this campaign when I came back, and every time I wanted to do something, the GM said, well, how do you say it? What do you do? What voice do you use? And I actually can use voices, but this kind of irritated me because I thought, what about a person that's shy, or a person that they want to be a bard, but they're not good at that? Well, tell me what you're doing. I make up a song about the king's victory in this battle. Oh, well, make it up. Let's hear it. Come on. maybe if the person's creative, and maybe they've gone off and done this, off session or something. But I just want to know what you're doing. I want to hear what you're doing so that when you do this, a persuasion, or you're charming these people, or getting them on your side, or intimidating them. I look you right in the eye and I say, me and you, if I ever, you're going to be, I don't have to do some crazy voice. I don't have to, because when you do that, when you force people, you're pushing some people away from that, and you're making it, and they've got an 18 charisma, okay? They might not have that in real life, right? But they've got one in the game. So ask what they're doing, and then let them make the roll based on that, and then give them something based upon those two things. All right, so there you have it, the 4 most important words that you as a GM can ask your players. And also, if you like my channel, please subscribe. Always looking for more. Please leave some comments. I'd love to hear about how you might have used this question, what are you doing, or your thoughts on this. I always like to read them and to answer them. And most importantly, my friends, the most important thing to do in regards to this game is to keep playing it. And of course, tell somebody else about it.